Okay, here we are. Joining me for the new show, new name for the show, by the way. The wrap up, RAP
Okay.
up. Not bad, not bad. Um, well, we're wrapping up a 111-102 loss, which ends the Raptors' little win streak that they had going. The Heat come in and I'd say fairly convincingly beat the Raptors, even though the score was sort of tight throughout the game. The Heat really controlled, maybe not for the first quarter too much, but generally speaking, they controlled the tempo and played the game at the pace with which their personnel and their style is most comfortable with.
Yeah, it's like, when the big brother is just holding up the ball and the little brother is just trying to get to it. That's kind of what this game felt like, right? Like the Raptors were pressing and pressing and just trying to stay in it. The Heat just seemed like they were in control. And I think especially with the zone and the Raptors unable to make their threes, when Kyle has an off game, it's always going to be tough. And so 1 of 10 from three is just tough to overcome.
Yeah, and you mentioned Kyle. He started off pretty well, right? I mean, he started
Yeah.
off fairly looking fairly good, like kind of almost like picking up where he left off from the last game. But why is it so difficult for the Raptors to manufacture offense in anything but the transition game? It seems to be a struggle. Yeah, Miami threw zone, Charlotte threw zone at them earlier on, which they were flummoxed by. Like, what is it about their configuration on offense that makes it so difficult for them to score in a slower game?
So I think first thing is they don't have someone who can genuinely thrive operating out of that mid post region, those elbow areas of the floor. And Chris Finch has been brought in to improve the cutting. That's still something that's not, I would say, a real strength of the Raptors. And then the last thing I would say is with smaller guards on the floor, they're still not able to get clean looks against teams with significant length. And so those possessions where, say, it's getting kicked out to someone who's 6'6", 6'7", and they're able to go up right away and not be intimidated by what's coming at them, it goes out to a Fred VanVleet, it goes out to a Kyle Lowry, and the Heat are able to close out to them. And so now they're having to recycle the offense, find a different look, and then you see the possession just drag on and drag on. And so I think that's where they run into problems.
And if you talk about it, that's a good summary of the overall picture on why they struggle on offense. Individually speaking, I never feel comfortable with the Raptors generating offense unless Fred is on the floor. Like, he almost seems to be table stakes for us to get anything going from anybody. Like, Kyle has spurts, but Fred's the only guy that with the ball. Siakam was sort of maybe during that stretch in the on the West Coast, like he was good with the ball, creating a little bit more. But other than Fred, there doesn't seem to be any organic shot creation coming from the rest of the guys. It really needs to be fueled by Fred, or it's almost like you end up in a situation where you're like really struggling. Forget to score, to even get a clean look.
Yeah, no question. And with Fred, as you said, 1 on 1, he can create that separation. But when teams are anticipating him at the rim, then he's left with no choice but to kick out. And then that's where your secondary, whether it's Siakam, whether it's Lowry, sometimes even OG, when they struggle to get that shot off, that's when, again, you see the possessions just drag out. Then it's under 5 seconds on the clock, and they're just throwing up whatever they can.
Even like today, man, like we always talk about the bench not necessarily like producing like the level we want them to. Today we got 16 from Davis, eight from Boucher. Powell had 7 points from him. Not Stanley Johnson didn't even score, so not great production from the bench. But that's been a story kind of all along, where you have where you can't really you can't really just expect 40 points to come off the bench like we had in previous years. And now I think that's just catching up to us now at this point. And our starters seem to have more pressure on them, and with more pressure, they're getting tighter, especially in a low tempo game, and it's not really working out. But let me ask you about Siakam. Like, what did you see of Siakam overall, both offensively and defensively? Because the general comment on his game is that yes, not a great offensive game, but still contributing effectively on defense. Like, what's your analysis there?
Defensively, I thought he was solid. Um, he was good enough, but I think offensively, one of the issues I have is he's trying to figure out a way to be that number one guy. Realistically, I think most people would say he doesn't seem to have that in him. But if he's trying to get to that level, one of the things he's got to do is not so much force his game, but continue to find creative ways to score. And I feel like, especially in a game like tonight where he's going up against Bam, he's looking at that and saying, okay, you know, you struggle the first couple possessions to create something. Okay, it's almost like he's straight away saying, okay, I don't have it tonight. I'm going to be unselfish and trust everyone else to get it going. But the margin for error on this Raptors team is so thin. It's kind of like, no, you have to get it going. And so when you look at the others, Kyle Lowry had a rough night. Chris Boucher, this was probably his worst performance in a while. And then you look at Norman Powell, he struggled as well. The Raptors just don't have the margin for error to afford that, right? Maybe one person can have an off night, but beyond that, that's it.
And I'm gonna say, man, the way we are trying to get Siakam going is all wrong. It just doesn't feel right. I think he is still a guy who is most effective when he catches the ball in a position where he can immediately slash. Like we saw against Phoenix, against Portland, Golden State. Those were situations where very quick moves as soon as he catches it, or he even catches it in a moving position and does something with the ball. Today against Adebayo one-on-one, face-up situation, 22 feet away from the rim with help ready to come is not how he's going to learn to become a number one player. Like as much as I subscribe to the theory that you got to let this guy play through his mistakes and give him a long leash, and it's okay if he takes a lot of threes because how else would he learn? I think the fundamental idea of putting him in just situations where the movement is dead and expecting him to produce, it's going to knock his confidence back, and it's not really integrating his offense into the team. It's just getting like shot practice for him.
Yeah, so a couple of things there. I think you're absolutely right. This is again leads into just finding more creative ways to get him involved. One of the things I'd like to see is the Raptors run that sort of stagger screen for Kyle Lowry or Fred VanVleet, and it helps create separation for them. Why not do the same for Pascal Siakam, where now you just give him that little bit of an advantage coming off the curl, and now maybe he can use that momentum to get to the basket, right? I feel like that's something that could help him. Another thing with Pascal is you have to just credit the Miami Heat defense tonight, because their transition defense was incredible, right? And you mentioned this, like Pascal, he likes to get that boost out of that transition game, right? He likes to get those easy buckets that just sort of boost his confidence, and then everything else starts to flow a bit more naturally. So without that, I think he looks at it and says, okay, well, if I'm operating primarily in the half court, then I've just got to look to be more of a facilitator. I think he is almost too unselfish to the point where it's like, okay, I don't have the advantage here against Bam, so I'm not going to be much of a factor in just a half court setting.
Yeah, it's well said, because it's almost like he convinces himself that this is not going to be his game. So let me focus on doing a lot of other things when everybody else sort of expecting him, and even the announcers. I mean, the Raptors probably have the most conservative, vanilla, like don't say anything offensive to piss off anybody type announcers in the league. And even they're like, that's not a good shot. Like, you got to do more than that. So when Leo of all people is like calling people out, there's probably some truth to that. But man, I mean, Siakam's season is a work in process. I mean, it's not, especially this season, given like there's nothing much at stake. I mean, I guess he can afford to learn. But let's talk about something positive, man. Like OG Anunoby just continues to develop. Like his progression can be measured on a game by game basis. I think people talk about like, he had a good month or he had a good year. Like game by game, he's showing you something different. His 3-point shot right now is as smooth as it has ever been. Is Vivek
Yeah.
gone?
You always have to expect. Hello?
Yeah, 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 yeah,
Oh, okay.
yeah.
I guess it disconnected for a bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I was saying with OG Anunoby, he's been a good 3-point shooter throughout his time in the NBA. So you always expected that to normalize at some point, and now he's hit a hot stretch from three. And what that does is it makes defenders close out that little bit harder, and that opens up the drive game where now he can attack the closeout, he can get to the basket, and then when he's attacking the glass, like those possessions where he was just going up strong against Bam Adebayo, that was really encouraging to see. Now, there are other occasions where I think he's got a smaller guy on him and he could just be a bit more patient, because I think he rushes to go up anticipating, Biggs getting back and blocking his shot. But I think if he's just a bit more patient and creates that space for himself first, he can get a lot more buckets inside.
Yeah, and I honestly I had some reservations on how much his offensive game would evolve this year, just because we haven't seen anything great from him consistently. So I've been sort of pleasantly surprised. Couple of questions here on the center position. Like Baines got some extended minutes. Why?
Because he played better. He honestly, this was the most progress he's shown. He was grabbing boards. I think he was actually connecting on a few screens and creating space for the guards. And so I think that's why he got a bit more of an opportunity. He seemed more in tune defensively. He didn't seem as out of position as he's been to start the season so far. And one thing I keep going back to with the Raptors is there's still a lot of low hanging fruit for this team. Like some of the mistakes they make are so basic, whether it's the turnovers on the offensive end, those last rotations on the defensive end. And among that low hanging fruit is Aaron Baines. Like at this point, no one's asking him. And I don't think at any point anyone was asking him to be Marc Gasol, but to just be serviceable, just be a net neutral. And it looks like he's getting closer to being able to do that.
I mean, it's like there's a big so what factor with Baines for me. Like, so what he had a great game. Like, so what he played a little bit better. It's not going to change anything in the larger equation. Like, so
you don't think so?
I don't know. It's such an underwhelming conversation to even have about Baines. It's so like we went from talking about like Ibaka and Gasol to Baines. So like even when I asked that question to you, like part of me was like dying inside. I was like, am I really talking about freaking Aaron Baines right now, man? Like the guy who can barely get into games, and we're celebrating that he was able to play 13 minutes. Like I don't know. It's just. It's a little desperate, especially because the Heat didn't even have their main guys. Like Butler didn't play. Like they got
Tyler Hero was out.
Hero was out like late scratch, and we still we still lost. So some guys like Baines cost us the lead with a tech. I don't know if he cost us the lead with a tech, but I mean here's my thing. You guys are all saying, like, even on Twitter, I was on Twitter for this one, and they were like, oh, Baines, yeah. And I'm like, dude, he had like a slightly better game than what he normally does. And we're conditioned to such poor center play that we're like celebrating it. So it's like a little depressing topic overall for me.
I hear where you're coming from, but I think the one thing I will say is for Nick Nurse, it's just about cobbling together a rotation, right? Yeah. And if Chris Boucher has a normal night for this season, and he puts up the numbers that he usually does, then I think those minutes look a lot better, because now it's just, hey, can you just fill in for the minutes that Chris Boucher is not on the floor? When it becomes, hey, Chris Boucher is not giving us something tonight, we need more from you, then it's like, hey, this is clearly subpar.
Yeah. So let's switch on a couple more topics, man. And the Raptors defense. So rebounding has been a problem all year long. I feel we have struggled with that from, I don't even know how many games there have been where we have had a rebounding advantage. I'd say in 80% of games we've been a minus on the boards compared to the other team. And for a team that has the imbalance that the Raptors have, I don't know what you can do. I don't know if it's possible to even win games without being up on the glass. So because you're talking about possessions at this point. Leaving the rebounding part of defense aside, why can't the Raptors stop anybody? Miami today, 49% shooting with missing their main guys, 45% from three, pretty much dribble penetration anytime they wanted. None killed us, but Bam in one-on-one situations against Siakam in the fourth quarter also dusted him a couple times. I can't think of any Miami guard that was not able to get to the paint at their own volition. Like there was nothing, there was no wall, there's no resistance to dribble penetration. And I know dribble penetration is hard. It's a league which favors the offensive player. It's tough to stop guys. But to the level that the Raptors are bad at that, we haven't seen this since like maybe when DeMar was here, even before that, I'd say.
So, to be completely honest with you, I feel like the Raptors have consistently been bad at dribble penetration. It's just their centers, Marc Gasol and Serge Ibaka, were so good around the rim that it took away a lot of that. And when you talk about Marc Gasol, positionally, he had everyone in the right spots. He was calling out plays, that communication of making sure everyone's able to anticipate what's coming next. That was huge for this team, and that's not there anymore. The other thing, and this is sort of a working theory that I have, is when teams are in the postseason, your biggest weaknesses get exposed. And for a long time, the Raptors, well, at least as long as Nick Nurse has been head coach, they've had this swarming defense, and they've allowed a lot of threes, especially a lot of corner threes. And I felt like the Celtics kind of solved that over the course of their series. And I think other teams have picked up on that. And so what we're seeing now is teams continuing to understand how they can expose that strategy. And I think that's something Nick Nurse is going to have to look at and address, because at the end of the day, yeah, the Raptors will say we're giving up those 3-point looks to the players that we want to. And, we're still sort of getting them to throw it away from the rim. The number one thing we want to do is protect the rim. But I think at the end of the day, when things continue to trend this way, you have to make an adjustment. And one of the things they have done, I will say, because of the dribble penetration, they've tried to switch more. But I remember when I used to cover the Raptors 905 for RR, Jerry Stackhouse said the biggest reason he doesn't like to go to switching as a plan A is because then it gives you no plan B. When you start with a man, when you start with a regular defensive philosophy, and then you go to switching as a backup plan, it makes things that much easier. When switching is your number one philosophy, that it makes everything else a lot more difficult.
Yeah. And switching does work. Against the Mavericks, it worked. The Mavericks are shorthanded as well, but they were a team that really struggled handling our switches, our closeouts, and got flustered into taking some bad shots. The Heat are just a more patient team, and they were able to negotiate our switches very easily. And you almost see it like a lot of the times on the 3-point line, you see just guys just like waiting and just doing a little head fake while the Raptor kind of flies by. And you see that more and more this year because, as you said, teams are anticipating that. So, just pulling that thread a little bit more, dribble penetration's always been there, which means that really our problems are at the center position where we have no cover. Like we don't have the centers to play the type of game that we want to play, yet we continue playing it. And people mentioned on the chat, and obviously Boucher had struggled defensively a little against Miami in that second quarter and third, got pulled pretty much. Did you read anything into the Alex Len being released? Is that a precursor to a move, you think, or is that like how did you read that?
I mean, it might be a precursor to a move in the future. I think the Raptors at this point will probably anticipate Yuta Watanabe getting to that 50-game mark and them having to give him a full contract. And so they might want to work out, how do we best fix this roster? Because let's face it, the weaknesses are glaring and the imbalance is there for everyone to see. So there's a move to be made. Patrick McCaw hasn't played this season, and if he's going to be injured, that's someone you potentially have to look at cutting because, again, the weaknesses are so glaring. So addressing the size, addressing the rebounding, that'll be the number one concern. So whether it's via trade, that's going to have to wait a little bit till all these contracts that were signed this offseason are actually eligible to be traded. And then, later down the line, you're potentially looking at maybe a buyout market, right? Just to get someone to finish out the season.
Yeah, I mean, people are saying moves coming. I don't see anything. I don't see anything on the market really that people are willing to trade at this point because everybody's sort of in a wait and see mode. And if anything, this is more flexibility for a potential deal that you may not have even scoped out yet. So the center woes, I mean, I expect to sort of continue right now. Like we talked about pretty much everybody, but let's give Davis his time of day. I think this was his best game. First half was great. Fourth quarter, he had a couple of shots. And this has been a continual theme. I think we've talked about this like 4 post-game shows in a row, that Nick Nurse has a tendency to shuffle who comes off the bench, and he's trying to find a bit of a rotation. Is it him shuffling off the bench? Is he literally still figuring out what the rotation, or is it like, how do you analyze his sub management? Because it has been all over the place in terms of like who comes off, when they come off, who gets to play. And the only joke I'll make is that everybody gets to play except Matt Thomas.
Yeah, I have no idea what Matt Thomas has done to kick himself off the rotation, but I think, there's 2 pieces to this. Nick Nurse definitely is trying to figure out who can fit into those minutes off the bench, but the biggest thing is no one has come out and flat out earned it, right? Like Chris Boucher has played great, and so he's getting the minutes. And you think back to last season when the Raptors went on that West Coast trip and there was no Kyle Lowry, there was no Serge Ibaka, and he had to all of a sudden depend on Rondae Hollis-Jefferson and Chris Boucher and these guys to come off the bench and do something. Before that, it was just a 7-man rotation. And I think he was looking for some of that early on and saying, hey, here are minutes for you, go grab them. And no one's really done that. And I think that just speaks to, the caliber of play they have coming off the bench, where you get a lot of inconsistency. And it's almost like right now he's just, trying to play the hand he's dealt on each night. And it's like, okay, who's actually got something going? And then just try to ride that.
As this season kind of drags on slowly, somewhat disappointingly, if you're Masai Ujiri and you're looking at what's going on here and you're looking at what the potential for this team is, how much are you just like writing this season off and pretty much planning for summer? And really, this season is an extended tryout for these guys on who gets maybe a longer term deal or something with the club, because it sort of feels like, with the rotations off the bench, with there's no contention, aspirations really. It seems like this is a giant tryout for a bunch of guys, and at the same time, he's gonna, and I'm going into prediction mode now, at some point he's just gonna look to, like, especially if the record stays around like what it is, or at this percentage at least, he's gonna look to probably ship Lowry and kind of restart the rebuilding process in the summer. Has your feeling towards that option changed since the start? Like maybe you were like 80-20 at the start that wouldn't happen, and now you're like the other way around?
See, I think my thinking on Lowry is more contingent on what he would want, and that probably not boding well for the Raptors. He would want to play for a contender. You look at the contenders and what they would have to offer, a Lakers team, a Clippers team, whatever it is. There's not a significant piece coming back for the Raptors. And so there would be no motivation to do it. The closest would be a Philadelphia, right? And if you can get some young pieces from them, that would be interesting. And I'm sure he would love to play for his hometown. So that would be the only team that would potentially be in play. And yeah, if it comes down to it where Kyle Lowry is ready to move on, that's the only way I would entertain it. I wouldn't want to just do it without his blessing.
Of course,
I think he's earned that right.
Yeah.
And the one thing I will say is, as soon as Kawhi left, it was always going to be about the 2021 offseason, and the 2 seasons in between were going to be about information gathering for the front office. How good can Pascal Siakam be? How good can Fred VanVleet be? How good can OG Anunoby be? And we're finding that out. And so just learning that in itself is going to help them make the best possible decision in the offseason to come.
Yeah. Do you think, and Kyle's an interesting point, because, people are saying Kyle played brutal in the second half. Yeah, he did. He had overall a poor game. I also don't think his poor showings hurt his trade value. Like I feel like his trade value is cemented at a certain. He brings a certain element to the team, a certain leadership, a certain skill. And even though he's gone 2 for 12 and he struggled, in a few games this season, I don't necessarily think it actually affects his trade value to a to any reasonable level.
Yeah, no, I'm totally with you on that. I think they see the value that he would bring to any of the contenders, right? That leadership, that toughness, that that ability to play, make, and create for others and make everyone around them better, right? At the end of the day, when we talk about, oh, can the Raptors still be a 6 seed or be in that play-in tournament, whatever it is, it's because the ceiling is so much higher when Kyle Lowry's on the floor, right? We see the way things fall apart when he's not, and I think a lot of teams recognize that. There's a reason why every time the All-Star game comes around, he's voted in by the coaches, right? There's a
Yeah.
tremendous respect level there.
Yeah. Final point on the game. We talked about our defensive struggles, our offensive struggles. The 3-point shooting has been pretty suspect all year. Even though we're getting half decent looks. I'm not gonna say we're getting bad looks. Like Norm, they're a little deeper than I would like them to be, but they're still somewhat open. Norm is struggling from three. Van Vliet's the only guy who seems to be willing to take he seems to be taking the right threes. Like he's not forcing them up. Everybody else seems to be opting for the three a little too frequently and not really going inside and getting very, very comfortable with the three. And yeah, it's maybe related to Miami sagging a little bit, and playing zone and kind of clogging up the paint and forcing the Raptors outside. Do the Raptors not have enough players who can actually beat their guy off the dribble? Like, do we have any guys who can create off the dribble?
The Raptors don't have enough. There's no question that they don't. And, a lot of times you see this conversation pop up online of, oh, the Raptors don't have a closer. The Raptors don't have a finisher. And, then you'll see the response of, oh, but this person's made this many shots in the clutch and this and that. When you make a jump shot, it looks great, contested, whatever it is. But that ability to create space, that is something the Raptors clearly lack. That ability to, dribble, drive, and, finish before the big is right with you at the rim. That's something the Raptors lack. And so, yeah, the 3-point shooting, I look at it almost like, remember when just before Marc Gasol got traded to the Raptors ranked like 16th or something like that in 3-point shooting. And all of a sudden he came and the Raptors, the rest of the season, finished first, right? And they were getting that extra split second to shoot the ball because they were getting these cleaner looks. And now that's gone again, right? And so I think that's something where now they recognize, like, they're shooting it almost because they're saying, hey, this is the cleanest look we're going to get. Because, this is what we're working with.
Yeah. It's almost like every conversation we have goes back to the center position. Like you pull a thread long enough and you go, oh, it's the centers. Of course it's the centers.
I mean, there's that Kawhi guy too.
Yeah. Who is your, like, I think I can sort of guess who the guys that, we enjoy watching are OGs, like probably on top of your list as well. Is there a guy who like is the most frustrating guy for you to watch like on this team?
Most frustrating guy to watch on the team, I would say Norman Powell has been really disappointing. I think especially coming off of last season, because, the word on him has always been the inconsistency, right? And last year, for the first time, it was like, wow, he's actually doing it every single night. He's giving you everything you would hope. And, he's being passable on defense. And now he's gone back to making the same mistakes. Like last year, he shot a percentage at the rim that didn't seem sustainable. It was pretty much around 70%. I don't know the exact number, but I know it was right around 70%. And that was not going to be sustainable. But the things that seemed sustainable was the fact that there seemed to be better decision-making. There seemed to be better balance and patience as he was attacking the rim. And now that seemed to have evaporated. He's gone back to that sort of one-track minded, I've made up my mind, this is what I'm going to do, and I'm going to rush to the rim. And the results are speaking for itself.
You see that shot he took today from like 24 feet out? Just jacked it up like with a screen. It was actually a shot, a rebound for Miami, and an assist for Miami in one play. Like, because he hit the backboard, it was a long rebound. Miami caught it in stride, pass ahead, 2 points, timeout. And I'm like, dude, that is, you're a veteran at this point. And taking that sort of shot when you're in there as as a showcase example. Like you're supposed to be an example for the younger guys on how to play composed and how to like be a professional and not take bad shots and do the right thing. And then you set that kind of example for guys like Davis and Flynn and Stanley Johnson and all these guys. And it just rubs me the wrong. It's like, what the hell are you doing, man? Like how in what scenario is that considered leadership, let alone like and a good shot?
Yeah, and the one thing I'll just add to that, and then with everything you're saying, is on that possession, it looked like he was trying to draw the foul, and there was, it was, and it was one of those things where that's a call that maybe James Harden will get, right? And you just have to recognize that you're not going to get that type of call. That's not what you can be playing for.
Yeah.
And so, he takes an off balance shot, like as you said, hits the backboard, they go the other way and get a bucket. It's just a terrible look and a terrible decision. And yeah, that's the thing. It's a low IQ play that unfortunately has happened too often with Norm.
So I think we've entered the part of the season where people are going to start calling for some bench guys. Paul Watson's name has come up in 3 consecutive games, post-game shows. And sign me up, man. A few more losses this way, and sign me up for Paul Watson, playing 20 minutes a game, and to just see what the young guys have. Empty the Malachi Flynn. Maybe I'm just upset after this loss a little bit, and I'm overreacting to it. But it certainly feels like I would certainly have more fun watching the young guys than what I'm seeing right now.
Yeah, for the front office, we said that this is still an information gathering season for them. And so I think you'll know pretty much what you need to know about this team at the end of this stretch, right? Like you've still got another game against Miami, then you've got 2 against Indiana, and then the Bucks. And so by then you have a really good idea of what this team is capable of. And from that point on, if you need to learn more about Paul Watson and Malachi Flynn, Utah Watanabe, whoever it is, then by all means, right? If they can pull up their socks and get a few wins here and look like they're genuinely riding the ship, then you got to back that up as well.
I think a quarter of the season, I mean, as you said, it's an important stretch coming up, and it's almost like culminated in the Bucks game, which kind of shows you what you got so far, right? So It's a nice little full stop, or in North America they call it period.
Exactly.
You ever call a sidewalk a footpath? All right, Jake. Vivek, man, thanks, dude, for coming on and talking through this somewhat depressing game. You can find Vivek on Twitter and for a bunch of different sites. They're all on his Twitter account.